Hello, welcome to the Talking Michigan Transportation Podcast. I'm Jeff Cranston. Recently, I spoke with Ben Stupka, who is the Executive Director of the Regional Transit Authority of Southeast Michigan. Ben has been in that role the past few years, having worked there previously before ascending to the top position. He has an extensive background in urban planning and has a great passion for transit and mobility for all, trying to serve all users, trying to coordinate services across Metro Detroit and Southeast Michigan, which has been a challenge for a long time. But recently, the RTA has made some serious strides with a number of services that they have a hand in, including the Q line in downtown Detroit. So he had a lot to say. He talked about how they basically focused on the incremental things that they can get done after very narrowly losing a ballot issue that would have provided solid funding across the region back in 2016. I think you'll enjoy his anecdotes and especially his enthusiasm for what he's doing. So I hope you enjoy the conversation. So Ben, I set this up a little bit in the introduction, but I was hoping that you could, as a first-time guest on the Talking Michigan Transportation Podcast, give a little bit about yourself and how you came to be the executive director at the Regional Transit Authority for Southeast Michigan, and then we'll delve more into what's ahead for the RTA.
Great. Yeah, no problem. Thank you for having me. I'm really excited to be on the podcast. So my background, I'm from Southeast Michigan originally. I went to Michigan State and University of Michigan, so I'm one of the few that's gone to both. Got my master's degree at U of M in urban regional planning. I went out to the Bay Area for a few years after I graduated and worked at an agency that actually managed local transportation funding for projects as big as light rail and BRT and as small as city curb ramp programs and street trees. So I got a lot of exposure to delivering capital projects, to funding capital projects, and how to connect planning ideas to delivering projects. My dream was always to help put regional transit together in Southeast Michigan and bring some of those types of capital projects and interventions to Southeast Michigan. So the opportunity to work at the RTA came about in about 2014. I happily came back with my family, and my family's here anyway, so I was doubly happy to work at the RTA. And I spent the first few years back here working directly with the RTA. Then I supported them as a consultant for many, many years. About 3 years ago, and coming back about 3 years ago, they gave me the honor of being the executive director. So it's been a ride with them in many capacities, but I've seen every part of the RTA.
Yeah. So let's talk about establishing the RTA. I was actually pretty new in the job at MDOT when we got it over the finish line in 2012. It was, I think, kind of clouded out by so many other things going on during that same legislative session, lame duck 2012. I'm sure you remember. But it was a big deal. And Bill Rustum, who was Governor Snyder's policy director and had done a similar job 40 years earlier for Governor Milliken, remarked at the time that, we've been trying to do this for 40 years, try to consolidate and have some kind of central planning for regional transit in Southeast Michigan. And sounds easier than it is, right? So,
yep.
And you weren't involved then in that effort legislatively, but I'm sure you were following it closely. So, just, I guess, talk about just how important it was, even though there was a ways to go and still is, just to get it established in legislation.
Yeah, I mean, the history, I think 40 years is probably right. And I know actually one of the first efforts I was involved in when I was at Michigan State as an undergrad, and then my first position after that was actually some early establishment of the DARTA legislation. So that was legislation to consolidate agencies and look at actually doing regional transit. That ended up dying right at the end of Governor Engler's term. There was another effort after that I kind of sat through as more of an advocate to see if they could get better coordination between SMART and DDOT. That was probably the early 2000, like 2003, 4, 5 range. And then it kind of died out again. And then finally, I think, got the right size and scale and partnership together in terms of the four counties that we represent: Wayne, Washtenaw, Macomb, and Oakland. Including the city of Detroit. Kind of got all those leaders together to say, hey, let's kind of let's stitch this together at the county level. So that it can be, well, it's about coordinating the transit providers. It's also about kind of coordinating at that county level and city of Detroit level. And with those leaders coming together, what we've seen over the last 10 years is being able to use the mechanism of the RTA to continue to kind of evolve the improvement of transit through those kind of county and city of Detroit relationships. I think that's been a really powerful glue that's held us together in this effort that's a little bit different than the ones in the past.
So you knew growing up in Michigan and going to college in Michigan about the divide, the historical divide between the city of Detroit and the suburbs. But you really saw it in stark relief as this moved forward. And so after getting the RTA established in 2012, a ballot issue went forward in 2016 that would have provided funding across, the whole region.
Yep.
And it narrowly missed, I think, maybe not even 1%, very close. A lot of people could have just thrown up their hands then and said, look, we tried, we gave it our all. This is never going to happen. You came along a few years later to take over. You were working there then, but to take over executive director. How do you keep your faith and your optimism that things can still happen?
That's a great question. It's it's the people we work with. It's the issue itself. The reason I'm so passionate about it, I really love the issue. And what I say to people is, when I grew up and I went to school and I was trying to decide what I wanted to do, and I kind of got in this idea of urban planning, and I started thinking about things like affordable housing, and I started thinking about things like sustainability, and I started thinking about things like education, and all these different pieces of kind of creating better communities. And all the conversations I was in, transit, in particularly in Southeast Michigan, transportation came up in every single one of those conversations. Every time I talked about a different issue, healthcare, whatever you name, it always came up as something that was important. And it just kind of struck me that this is an issue that could unlock so much opportunity for so many people, that it just kind of was something that I wanted to see. And then just growing up in Southeast Michigan and kind of having that idea of like, I didn't really taking the bus taking the bus to school, and obviously that's something we did, but it wasn't something that we grew up with, even though they're all around us, and it just wasn't something we grew up with. Like, why is that? What's like, why culturally are we here? So
I'm sure it came up for myriad reasons in those conversations. You heard, everybody had kind of their own reason, but what were the overall themes? Was it a social justice thing, or was it this is how I'm going to keep my kids here after they graduate and come back, or was it just all of that?
In terms of why, like the benefit of transit?
Yeah.
So I would say that there's a it's almost always jobs and connectivity to jobs, and that comes from I'd say two perspectives. So we hear it, and kind of very obviously, from people who are job seekers, and want to be able to get a reliable way to get their job without owning a car. As we all well know, it's very, very expensive, if not the most expensive, to own a car in Southeast Michigan, particularly in the city of Detroit. So there's a large kind of that perspective. The other perspective that we don't really think about as much, but is just as salient, is the small business owners, right? It's the people who need people to get to their jobs and be able to have reliable transportation, and the idea of having to retrain somebody and all those costs that go in with that. So that's another piece that we've heard about, and I'd say even more and more and more as businesses expand and business opportunities. So this is kind of the third piece. It's that business attraction. So another big thing that really we weren't able to get everything done the way we wanted to, but I remember 2018-19 when Amazon was looking for headquarters, and we all kind of tried to get together, and that was one of the things we heard back from them, was that they weren't interested in Southeast Michigan because we didn't have a comprehensive regional transit system. So it's not only the person getting to the job, the small business who needs a person at their job, but it's also an economic competitiveness issue. And in some ways, it's cost us, the opportunity for attracting large businesses and large headquarters and those types of things.
Yeah, I saw it in committee meetings in the legislature when talking about transit, when transit operators would come to make their case for, local bus operating funds and what they needed. And it was surprising at the number of lawmakers who didn't think about the large retailers in their districts. They were in the suburbs, and that's where the malls are, and that's where the big shopping centers are. And those are the workers that the people who run those businesses need to get there. So it seems like a no-brainer, but you really have to spell it out, don't you?
Yeah, absolutely. And I'll never forget, one of the early things the RTA did with SMART and DDOT was we worked to establish what is now called the FAST service. So on Woodward, Gratiot, and Michigan, SMART operates a service called FAST, which basically is a limited stop service, stops every 2 or 3 miles. But it's been the RTA helped get that started back in 2016, 17, using some LBO money and some kind of our coordination authority to do that. And I remember early on getting on that service, maybe after it'd been running about 6 months, I wrote it. I think I was riding down to a Tigers game. It was on the weekend. And I got on maybe at 3 p.m. Every single person on there had a uniform from a job.
Interesting.
Every single person. It was full, it was packed full. It was the middle of a weekend, early afternoon on a weekend. Every single person was coming or going to a job, except for me. I was going to a Tigers game, but maybe some other folks too going to a Tigers game. But I was like, this is exactly what we're talking about here. Like, there's people going to jobs at different types of jobs, all kinds of stuff. I was like, this is exactly what we're doing here. This is the point of getting good quality service up and running is to provide those connections to jobs, let alone connections to healthcare and other community resources. I mean, you can kind of spread the gamut, but it's really that job and opportunity connection that keeps me coming back. When you get to see something like that and be on the bus, and it just makes you want to keep doing it,
Well, you know what? I want to talk about that a little bit. I mean, there was a really interesting story in Axios Detroit this week, and I thought it was really good news for you to hear that Mayor Sheffield is very invested in this. She sees it as an important priority for the things that she wants to do in the city and her agenda. And I wanted to get your take on the discussion about maybe making some improvements to the People Mover, which with the success of the Lions and the Tigers the last few years, that's had to have made a huge difference in their ridership, right?
Yeah, absolutely. So both the People Mover and the Q Line streetcar have actually really rebounded very nicely out of the pandemic in terms of ridership numbers, getting close to, if not exceeding, pre-pandemic numbers. So and no small part is that due. It's good. It's nice to have really competitive sports teams in a sports town where all the arenas are next to each other, and it's great to have a great convention and visitors bureau and attracting all the different events that we have downtown for those services. But I think both the Q Line and the People Mover are looking to figure out how we can continue to take advantage of it, how we can work together to take advantage of those things. And they've been doing, particularly the People Mover, they've been doing some really cool branding stuff and events and really activating the space. I mean, all their stations are in like these really cool old buildings. They have artwork. They're really trying to kind of explore like, what are the other positive aspects of this service? How is it a cultural community asset beyond just the loop that you can ride? And I think they've done a really good job the last several years, kind of figuring out how do we rebrand ourselves a little bit. Doesn't hurt that they have a sponsorship to make it free. The Q Line is also free. That just makes it that much easier. Free to the rider. Free to the rider. It is. There's some public money that goes to support it. But we often say, but for both services, I kind of think of them as like the front door to regional transit. So I think about a region where not a lot of people, particularly people within the region, take transit. And if the first opportunity they may have to take it or they may want to take it is often the Q Line or the People Mover. So if we can make those experiences as easy, as pleasant, and as fun as possible, it gets them, kind of comfortable trying out something. Maybe then they try a fast bus. Maybe they try one of our express buses, and we kind of can bring them into, it's okay. You can get on a transit vehicle. It's fine.
No, I think you're right. I think that gets them comfortable with the concept. And then the more you do something successfully, the more you're willing to try something related. But I wanted to comment on when you talk about the stadiums all being downtown. You probably don't remember this, but there was a Sports Illustrated story shortly after the Palace opened. And Coleman Young was quoted at the time because somebody for the Pistons, I don't know if it was Davison or somebody else, said, hey, you can define the city in myriad ways, and certainly Auburn Hills is part of the city, writ large. And Coleman Young said, poppycock, the city is where the freeways merge.
Yeah.
If he had lived to see these stadiums all come back downtown and be centrally located and have LCA and Ford Field and Comerica Park, which I assume will be changing its name soon because of the bank merger, all in the same place, that's just that kind of synergy, overlap is great for lots of things. And you guys are doing the stuff you're doing at just the right time to capitalize on that, I think.
Yeah, absolutely. So, and I would say, and we've certainly had a lot of success even with, we have our newer express bus services. They're a couple of years old. One connects downtown Detroit to downtown Ann Arbor. That's called D2A2. We have another one that connects downtown Detroit to the Airport Express, just one stop stops at both terminals in downtown. Both of those, Airport Express is almost 3 years old. D2H is about 4 years old. And we've seen just ridership every year up and up and up and up and up. It just continues to go really, really well. And the more events we have, not only for the regional traveler, but now we're seeing people from out of town coming in and using the service. It's really great. And just another way to kind of get people out there.
Yeah, so as that momentum builds, it eventually creates the case for a BRT, a dedicated lane to the airport, or possibly commuter rail, right? That's all stuff that we aspire to.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that's really the approach we've taken. We talked earlier about the 2016 ballot initiative. I often say, if you look at that, we try to kind of we kind of tried to hit a home run in one swing, right?
Yeah.
And we got it out. I mean, we got out there. It went out. It hit the top of the fence and bounced into someone's glove, unfortunately. But since that time, we've taken a little bit more of a deliberate approach and tried to kind of hit some singles, hit some doubles. Just get on base, take a walk if you have to. Just keep getting things out there. Keep making improvements. Keep positive stories up, keep working with different communities. One of the things we often talk to the legislators about that's been a really successful model in the last several years is making investments in supporting what we call community services. So these are the services in kind of the more suburban and rural areas in our region. Think of places like Lake Orion, places like Highland Township, places like Chelsea, places like Richmond, where they're working together with a couple of surrounding townships. They have their own community service, and those services have been growing and growing and growing, particularly as people are aging in place and the demographics are shifting even more there. We've seen tons of ridership increases there, and it's just given us the opportunity to continue to work with them and kind of bring them into the regional system. And how do we kind of just grow those partnerships to really maintain that, maintains a community ownership model, but we're starting to bring a little bit more regional resource and focus to them. So we're growing that part of it as well, which has been really good.
That's great. And you'll never go wrong with baseball metaphors on my podcast.
That's what I figured.
Stay with us. We'll have more on the other side of this important message.
The Michigan Department of Transportation reminds you that when a vehicle collides with another vehicle, person, or other object, it is a crash, not an accident. By reducing human error, we can prevent crashes and rebuild Michigan roads safely.
Talk a little bit about the future. I mean, I think a lot of people probably don't know what you're already doing. I think after that 2016 ballot issue, many people, especially outstate, kind of tuned out to the RTA and what it's doing. And like you said, in the meantime, you were playing small ball and picking away at what you could do. So you've got a role with the Q line and some other things. You talked about SMART a little bit. You talked about DDOT, but kind of lay out what all of those services are and how you work to interweave them.
Sure. So at a very high level, there's kind of five larger services in our region. So there's DDOT, which is in the city of Detroit. There's SMART, which is basically the suburban Metro Detroit area. And they do serve within the city on a couple of routes as well. There's the RIDE, which covers most of Ann Arbor, Ypsilanti, and Ypsilanti Township. And then there's the Q Line and the People Mover, which are kind of in the downtown. And then outside of that, there's kind of small community providers, townships, partnerships at city level. Maybe like the city of Sterling Heights Senior Center has a couple of buses. So we have a pretty large ecosystem. So a couple of the key things that we've done recently to work. So what we do is we all work together and we talk about what makes sense for us to coordinate on. What's the best thing we can do? And it might not be everything, but when we kind of come up with that idea and that concept collectively, that's what we use our master planning process to do. We say, all right, the RTA is going to take, the lead on this one. And most of them will take kind of the early lead because we're small. We can move much more quickly. We can kind of get things up and running. So a really good example of something we've done recently is the Transit app. So this is an app anybody can download. You can actually download it for free anywhere. But we have in our region, so this covers all the providers I talked about, an upgraded version. So you can plan trips across all the providers. You can book trips on a couple of the flex services that run. Smart runs some, and the RIDE runs some. You can pay for services, and you can get real-time information. So you come into our region, download the Transit app. It's an upgraded version, totally for free for anybody. One way to get information about anything you want to do in transit. So that's something we launched in November. And we're already seeing, 20-30% increases in usage over the last couple of months. So it's been going really, really well. So it's just like an example. Another one that we don't promote as much, but I always like to say is that we partner with Ageways, which was formerly an area agency on Aging 1B, kind of quasi-governmental organization. They run a service in partnership with us called My Ride 2. Really cool model is you can call 1-855-MyRide2 in any one of our 4 counties. You can go to myride2.com. If you're a senior, if you're a person with disability, if you're a caregiver and you want any kind of transportation option you can think of, anything from smart buses or the Q Line streetcar to non-emergency medical private services and anything in between, there's basically a concierge service that you can call, and they'll help figure out, hey, what is your issue? What can we help you? What is a mobility option for you? So yeah, that's just a couple examples.
Yeah, and the big challenge is education and making the people who could benefit from that aware, right? I mean, Phoenix Mobility, I'm sure you're familiar with them and what they're doing in the first mile, last mile area. How do you get the word out so that the people that could actually benefit from this know about it?
Yeah, I mean, that's the challenge. That's why we do things like this. That's why we do things like, just kind of making sure we're communicating clearly about some of those entry point things, like something like the Transit app is one of those things where if people just know it exists, it's really easy to use. And at the very least, if you download it, if you're in Southeast Michigan, you download it and say you live in Troy, and you've never thought about take a look, and you just look, be like, oh, there's actually a lot of transit options I could take from here. I just never even thought about it. I just didn't come up, and just getting people over that knowledge of what's there, and got to give them multiple ways to get that knowledge. And then it's one of the hardest, most challenging things to do. And it's probably like this with anything, is getting people to take that first ride. Just take that first ride. Just try it once. That's again where the Q Line and other services help. Smart has been doing a lot of really good work. They did a really cool programming for like Valentine's Day. They did some shuttles downtown. They call it like Smart After Dark, but just getting people to get back and forth. We did a lot. The draft, the NFL draft, I know that was just an over weekend event, but I think we had like 200,000 transit riders in that couple of day period.
There was crazy the interest in that.
Yes, it was. And a lot of those people were first-time riders, but it made sense, right? Because you couldn't really hard to access any other way. And we were able to put some special services, again, Smart and DDOT and others put some special services together for that event. But it's really kind of getting that first time to just try it. And then, if it's just something that people start to see as a semi-viable option, maybe it's not something you do every day, but if you're like, oh, I could take the bus once or twice a week, it's a good option if parking prices go up, and which they are,
Right. Right.
just having that option out there for people.
So they didn't really think about this 40 years ago, but going to your point about the elderly or people with disabilities and, the imperative of mobility for all, does the RTA have a role in what the people mover is talking about and trying to make it more accessible?
In terms of making the people mover more accessible?
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah. Yep. So we have a couple of roles. One of the key things that we do is we do a regional, it's called the Mobility for All plan is what we brand it as. But it's a mandated plan where you have to provide strategies to help people with disabilities and seniors. It's a federally mandated plan. It's actually called, just for your audience, because I know it's actually called the Coordinated Human Services Transportation Plan. But we don't call it that because no one ever, that's the FTA name for it. We don't call it that though, because no one would
I like
tune out
mobility for all.
Yeah. So we call it Mobility for All. So we update that, and then every 2 years we actually do a call for projects with some of the federal funding that flows through the RTA, and we get that funding out to community services, but also for the people movers receive some funding to upgrade, get ADA upgrades at their stations. The My Ride 2 service I talked about before is funded through that, so we actually have an investment program. And I think one of the things for folks who are listening that we didn't touch base on, but one of the key roles that the RTA has is that all the federal and state funding that comes to the region actually flows through the RTA. So we always are trying to balance kind of making sure we get that out to the providers and get that as close to the street as possible. That's job number one. But then also, making sure when it's going to the providers, what are they doing with it? Is it advancing a regional goal? Are we, so we do have kind of that oversight ability, that to say, hey, can we make an adjustment here? Can we make an adjustment here? Could we kind of try this pilot? Can we try that pilot? Let's make sure we're working together. So we have a little bit of a stick. We don't, we try and make it. As much as possible, but
it's comparable to what MDOT does with the transit agencies across the state. So that makes a lot of sense. So, lastly, I want you to talk about your perceptions and research and what you've learned over the years in talking to counterparts around the country, because it's widely believed, and I don't know if we've oversold this as the phenomena, that's the real reason that it was so difficult to establish reliable transit in Detroit. It's just because it's the Motor City, and there were powers that really wanted everybody to own their own car. I mean, there was an economic imperative there, right? And even though before it became Motor City, it had a pretty robust streetcar system with a lot of public transportation. But when you think about other cities in the Midwest, Cleveland obviously had a lot of auto production. But when you talk to others that aren't from the Midwest, are they kind of shocked at how difficult it's been for a city that size to get this moving?
Yeah, I would say that there's some surprise. I think people, again, they ascribe the Motor City label, and they have the same kind of perception you talked about. I would say that, from my perspective, the automakers and others, see having good transit as a quality of life and job and talent attraction issue. I mean, they get it. They were supportive of us in 2016. I mean, they get it. They need to attract talent to maintain their businesses, and they're looking at evolving their businesses, right? I mean, that's a huge thing. They're looking at what's the future of mobility, mobility technology and all those things. So they know they need the brains that want to live here to help them do that. So I think they absolutely understand it. I don't think they see it as a competition thing in any way, shape, or form. From my perspective, obviously, maybe there's rose-colored glasses there, but I think that's evolved.
I think you're right. I think that for a lot of people, it's about, whether it's the train or a bus, it's the ability to do something else, while you're commuting, so that you're not glued to a steering wheel. And, everybody says their commute is 20 minutes, no matter how long it really is. So I've thought that would be a huge factor for a younger set of people who are, very technologically plugged in and would say, I don't mind giving up my car so that I can get stuff done.
Yeah. And I would also say, I mean, there's, for younger folks, I mean, the ability to own a home, just affordability in general, we know is a huge issue across the board. Right. So
more than ever. Yeah.
More than ever, and particularly for folks younger than me, and so just having those options, having them be affordable, it's all part of being able to attract and retain people here in this region.
Yeah. Well, we could go on forever. You guys have a lot going on, and I'm really happy for everything that's happened and the progress, and I think your approach has been really good in saying, you know what, we're not going to go for the grand slam again. We're going to try to see what we can do on an incremental basis. And you've made a lot of strides. So
that's right. You can win, you can win championships that way.
Yeah. Well, yeah. I mean,
make playoffs,
the Ty Cobb's era, that's all they did. So
that's right.
So yeah, thanks, Ben. I appreciate you taking time to talk about this.
Yeah.
I'd like to thank you once more for tuning in to Talking Michigan Transportation. You can find show notes and more on Apple Podcasts or Buzzsprout. I also want to acknowledge the talented people who help make this a reality each week, starting with Randy Debler, who skillfully edits the audio, Jesse Ball, who proofs the content, and Jackie Salinas, who posts the podcast to various platforms and transcribes the audio to make it accessible to all.